A group of 5 friends, Emma, Jake, Mia, Lucas and Sarah, decided to escape the stresses of their city lives and go for a weekend getaway. They found a remote cabin at the edge of a dense, misty forest, far from any other cabins or towns. It seemed like the perfect place to unwind, with its rustic charm and isolation. They had been told the cabin was known for its quiet surroundings and peaceful nights under the stars. On the first night, they sat around the fireplace, chatting and laughing, drinking beers and telling old stories. The wind howled outside, but inside the cabin, the warmth of the fire made everything feel cozy and safe. As the night wore on, they decided to retire to their rooms. But when they woke up the next morning, things began to feel off. Emma was the first to notice. Her sleeping bag, which had been neatly folded by the fireplace when they arrived, was now scattered in the middle of the room, as if someone had been inside. She dismissed it as her own carelessness, but then she noticed something strange. A small, jagged symbol carved into the wooden floor beneath her feet. It looked like an eye. At first, she thought it might be a strange knot in the wood, but the more she looked at it, the more unsettling it felt. Jake laughed it off, brushing it aside as some kind of weird decoration from whoever had built the cabin. But as they went about their day, more oddities began to surface. Sarah went to grab some firewood from the shed, but returned looking pale. "The door was wide open when I got there. I know I locked it," she said, her voice trembling. "And when I stepped inside, the woodpile was all jumbled up." Mia, trying to distract herself from the growing tension, decided to take a walk through the surrounding woods. She didn't go far, only to the edge of the clearing where the cabin stood. But when she came back, she was visibly shaken. "I saw something. I swear I did. It was a person, but not really." She described a shadowy figure standing at the edge of the trees, unmoving, staring towards the cabin. It had no distinct features, just a dark silhouette that seemed to melt into the forest. Later that evening, as they sat around the dinner table, Lucas noticed something chilling. A faint carving on the wooden wall near the staircase. It was an eye, much like the one Emma had seen on the floor, but this one had been scratched deep into the surface, as if someone had been trying to make it as visible as possible. Beneath it, there was a message. "He watches, never leave." The air grew thick with dread. Sarah ran her fingers over the message, but as she did, another message appeared underneath it, one that hadn't been there before. It read, "He is always watching. You cannot hide from him." The group exchanged uneasy glances. Something wasn't right. They began looking around the cabin more carefully, checking the other rooms. They found more carvings, hidden behind furniture, etched into door frames, and scratched into the wooden rafters above their heads. Each one was the same eye symbol, and each one had cryptic warning. In a panic, Mia ran to the front door, only to find it jammed shut. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't get it open. Lucas tried the windows. None of them budged. It was as though the house itself was trapping them in. Suddenly the cabin door creaked open, almost as if on its own. They froze, but no one moved to close it. They were paralyzed by the unnerving silence. Then they heard it, the sound of footsteps outside, slow and deliberate, crunching the dry leaves on the forest floor. A shadow shifted across the threshold, but no one could see who it was. The shadowy figure from Mia's vision returned, now standing just beyond the doorway. But this time, there was something else. The eyes of the figure gleamed, and they were wide open, unblinking, watching them from the darkness. The figure didn't move, only stared, its presence suffocating. In a panic, Emma rushed towards the fireplace, grabbing the poker and holding it up defensively. "We need to leave now," she shouted. But when she looked back at the door, the figure had disappeared. Only the whisper of the wind remained. They decided to stick together, barricading themselves inside the cabin and keeping watch through the night. But the feeling of being watched never left. As they huddled in the living room, they could hear something moving just outside the windows, scraping against the wood. Hours passed, and their nerves were fraying. At one point, Mia found a journal hidden behind one of the wooden planks of the cabin's walls. The journal was old, filled with strange writings and drawings. The last entry was written in a frenzied hand, read, "The Watcher never leaves. He watches you sleep. He waits for the right moment, and when he does, you'll never see it coming. His eyes are everywhere." The group realized they weren't alone. Someone or something had been watching them since the moment they arrived. The Watcher was not just a myth or a ghost. It was real. By dawn, the cabin seemed even more oppressive. The carvings grew more aggressive, as if the Watcher was trying to communicate. As the sun rose, the group fled, leaving everything behind, never looking back. They swore they'd never return to that place, and they never spoke of it again. But years later, when they shared their stories around another campfire, they could never shake that feeling that the Watcher was still out there, waiting, watching. A group of 5 friends, Ben, Olivia, Mark, Sarah, and Emma, decided to take a weekend hiking trip in the mountains. After hours of trekking, they stumbled upon a forgotten cemetery. Overgrown with ivy and surrounded by a fog that seemed unnaturally thick. Old weathered gravestones lined the area, their names barely legible, as though time had erased all traces of the dead. Curious, they ventured closer, snapping photos and joking about the eerie setting. But as they walked deeper into the cemetery, a chill settled in the air, and the forest fell unnervingly silent. Olivia noticed something strange, an inscription on a gravestone that hadn't been there before, reading, "They return to claim what is theirs." Confused, they laughed it off and continued exploring, but then Ben vanished. One minute he was there, and the next, gone. Panic set in as they searched the cemetery, but there was no sign of him. Only the sound of faint, distant footsteps echoing in the fog. Sarah screamed when she saw the figure, a shadowy, translucent form moving between the graves. It was Ben, but his eyes were empty, and his mouth moved as if calling for help. Though no sound came out, he faded into the mist. The group tried to leave, but the cemetery seemed to stretch on endlessly. One by one, they disappeared into the fog, their screams fading into the cold air. The last thing Emma saw before she vanished was Mark, his face pale and twisted in terror, his lips silently mouthing the words, "They're coming." The next day, hikers found the cemetery, but no sign of the campers remained. Only the wind, whispering with the echoes of their final screams. While hiking deep in the woods, a lone hiker named Jack stumbled upon an abandoned campsite. A weathered journal lay beside a dying fire, its pages filled with frantic, scrawled entries. The first few pages described a typical hiking trip: setting up camp, enjoying the peace of the forest, and the beauty of the surroundings. But as Jack flipped through the pages, the tone began to change. The entries grew erratic, the handwriting more disjointed. "I kept hearing footsteps, but no one is here," read one entry. "It's watching me," read another. The final entry sent a chill down his spine. "It's been following me for days. It doesn't sleep. It never stops. I think I've led it to this camp." Jack shuddered, scanning the woods around him. The wind rustled the trees, but there was no sign of anyone. He turned to leave but froze when he heard something behind him. Footsteps. Soft, but deliberate. He wasn't alone. The journal slipped from his hands as he ran, but the footsteps didn't stop. They were right behind him, too close, growing louder. He never made it out of the woods. Weeks later, another hiker would find the journal, only to read one last haunting line. "If you're reading this, it's already following you." A group of friends, Tom, Sarah, Liam and Emma, decided to venture deep into the remote forest for a weekend camping trip. While trekking off the beaten path, they discovered an old rundown cabin hidden among the trees. It wasn't on any map, and it looked abandoned, with its windows coated in grime and the door slightly ajar. Curious and eager to explore, they decided to spend the night there, away from the usual campsite. As dusk settled, an unsettling feeling grew. The air felt heavy, as though something was lurking just outside their view. They laughed it off, thinking it was simply the isolation, but the sensation only intensified. Every creak of the old wood seemed louder than usual, and the shadows outside the cabin seemed to stretch unnaturally. Sarah felt the most uneasy, repeatedly glancing out the window, sure she could see something moving just out of sight. By morning, the cabin was gone, vanished as if it never existed. There was not a trace left, not even a footprint in the soft earth outside. The friends stood in disbelief, staring at the empty patch of land where the cabin had stood. The forest around them seemed unnervingly quiet. No birds, no breeze, just silence. As they turned to leave, a figure emerged from between the trees. It was tall and gaunt, its eyes hollow and lifeless, staring directly at them. Its presence was suffocating, like a shadow from a forgotten nightmare. They didn't dare move, but one by one, the friends started to feel the pull of something unseen, something terrifying. Liam was the first to vanish, his scream echoing through the woods, followed by Emma, who disappeared without a sound. Tom and Sarah ran, desperate to escape, but no matter how far they ran, the woods seemed to stretch endlessly. It wasn't long before Sarah was taken too, leaving Tom to stumble through the forest alone, his heart pounding with fear. The last message Tom sent to the group chat, shaking as he typed, "The cabin's back." And then there was nothing. A lone camper, Alex, decided to set up his tent near an old, abandoned lighthouse perched high on a cliff. The area was notorious for strange happenings, but Alex thought it would be an adventure. The eerie silence of the cliffs felt unsettling, but Alex shrugged it off and settled in for the night. Around midnight, the silence was broken by the sound of a distant bell ringing, followed by heavy footsteps crunching on the gravel. Thinking it was some local wandering the cliffs, Alex grabbed a flashlight and ventured out to investigate. But when he reached the lighthouse, there was no one inside. The bell rang again, this time louder, the sound closer. A chill ran down Alex's spine as he returned to his tent, but a shadow loomed in the doorway of the lighthouse. Standing there was an old, disheveled figure in a tattered lighthouse keeper's uniform. The figure's hollow eyes stared at Alex, and it muttered in a raspy voice, "You're not supposed to be here." Fear gripped Alex's chest as he turned and bolted, heart pounding. But no matter where he ran, the sound of the bell rang louder, and the heavy footsteps followed, never faltering. It felt as though their lighthouse keeper was right behind him. Days later, searchers found Alex's lifeless body standing in the lighthouse's doorway, staring blankly out to sea. The bell continued to ring, echoing faintly in the distance, as if it never stopped. One night, a group of friends camped near an old, secluded lake. As they gathered around the campfire, they noticed one of their lanterns had gone missing. They searched their campsite, but there was no sign of it anywhere. At first, they thought that one of them had accidentally moved it. But as they began to settle in for bed, the lantern appeared again, this time glowing faintly near the edge of the woods. One of the friends, curious, went to retrieve it, but as soon as they reached for the lantern, it vanished into the trees. Panicking, the group tried to call their friend back, but they were silent, and the lantern's light flickered in the distance, moving deeper into the forest. When they finally ventured to find their missing friend, the lantern was resting by a tree, but there was no trace of them. Only their empty sleeping bag remained. As they turned to leave, the lantern flickered one last time before extinguishing, leaving them in complete darkness. A young woman named Emily went camping alone in a quiet, isolated forest. After setting up her tent, she left her backpack near the entrance, filled with supplies for the night. When she returned after gathering firewood, the backpack was gone. At first, she thought someone else had taken it, but there was no one around. The forest was unnervingly silent, and she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. As dusk settled in, she heard faint whispers from the deep in the woods. Deciding to investigate, she followed the voices until she found the backpack, lying in the middle of the forest floor, its contents spilled out. Her heart raced as she knelt down to pick it up. Suddenly the whispers turned into soft laughter, and before she could react, the backpack was yanked from her hands, vanishing into the trees. The laughter echoed around her, growing louder and more manic. She ran back to her tent, but it was too late. The next morning, the backpack was found again, this time inside her tent, neatly packed. But when she opened it, everything was gone, except for a single note: "Don't leave again." A group of friends on a weekend camping trip decided to explore the woods near their campsite. As they wandered deeper into the forest, they stumbled upon a set of old stone steps hidden beneath thick pine trees. The steps descended into the earth, and curiosity got the best of them. They decided to investigate. At the bottom of the stairs, they found an ancient stone crypt, its entrance covered by moss and vines. With some effort, they pried open the heavy door. Inside, the air was thick and stale, the walls lined with faded carvings and decaying remains. It felt wrong in a way they couldn't explain. One of the friends, Mark, ventured deeper into the crypt, finding a cryptic message carved into the stone: "You should not have come." Suddenly the door slammed shut behind him, and the rest of the group scrambled to open it, but it was sealed tight. Mark's voice echoed from within, pleading for them to let him out. They finally managed to open the door, but when they entered, there was no sign of Mark. Only the faint sound of distant footsteps echoing through the crypt. They never spoke of what happened again, but each of them still dreams of Mark, lost forever in the tunnels below. A group of friends sat around a campfire one night, telling ghost stories. When one of them, Tim, recited a particularly creepy tale. He told them about a haunted campground where the ghost of an old man roamed, looking for lost souls to drag into the woods. The catch? He could only take someone who had told a ghost story that night. As the group laughed nervously, they didn't think much of it until they heard a soft, raspy voice calling from the darkness. "It's your turn now," it whispered. At first, they thought it was one of the friends messing around. But the voice came again, this time closer. They turned their flashlights towards the sound, but no one was there. Suddenly, Tim screamed. His flashlight fell to the ground, and he disappeared into the woods. The group searched frantically, calling his name, but they never saw him again. All they found was his flashlight, lying on the ground, its light still flickering. They ran back to their tents, terrified, but the voice didn't stop. It followed them throughout the night, until morning when the sun came up and the voice fell silent. But Tim never returned, and no one dared to tell a ghost story around the campfire ever again. Deep in the woods, far from any well-worn trail, stood a cottage in disrepair. The roof sagged, the windows were cracked, and ivy had long since overtaken the stone walls. The locals spoke of it in hushed whispers, warning anyone who ventured near that the house was cursed, abandoned by time, and left to rot in the forgotten parts of the forest. But there was one thing that they never told anyone. The house was never empty. It had stood there for generations, long before anyone could remember. No one knew who had built it, or why it was left alone in such an isolated spot. But those who dared to approach would notice something odd. No birds ever sang around the cottage, and the air seemed unnaturally still. The ground was unnervingly quiet, as though nature itself avoided the house. One evening, a wanderer, drawn by the rumours of treasures hidden in forgotten places, stumbled upon the cottage. The forest around it seemed colder than it should have been, a sharp contrast to the warm summer evening. But curiosity urged the traveller forward. He approached the house cautiously, noticing the air felt thick, almost suffocating. Despite the ominous atmosphere, he pushed the creaky door open and entered. Inside, the air was stale, filled with the smell of damp earth and herbs long past their prime. Cobwebs stretched across the corners of the room, and strange symbols were scratched into the wooden floor. The walls were lined with shelves of jars, some containing what appeared to be dried herbs, others filled with murky liquids that seemed to wither and bubble, though there was no visible movement. As he explored the cottage, the wanderer noticed an old rocking chair by the window. It rocked back and forth, as if stirred by an invisible hand, creaking with a sound that echoed through the silence. The longer he stayed, the more oppressive the air became. It felt as if something unseen was watching, something waiting. The traveller's heart began to race, and a sudden chill ran down his spine. He made his way to the back room, where a large fireplace sat cold and empty. A thick, dust-covered book lay open on a table, the pages yellowed with age. The symbols etched in the margins matched those on the floor. Drawings of strange creatures, dark rituals, and ancient incantations filled the pages. But it wasn't the book that caught his attention. It was the reflection in the dark window behind it. For a moment, he thought it was his own face staring back at him. But as his eyes adjusted, he realized the reflection wasn't him at all. The figure was old, hunched over, with long, stringy hair that hung over her face. She wore tattered clothing, and her gnarled hands were raised, as if she was casting something. Something powerful, something evil. Before he could move, a cold breath blew through the room, extinguishing the light of his lantern. The shadowy figure in the reflection moved closer, its eyes now visible, black and empty, voids that seemed to swallow any light. The wanderer tried to scream, but no sound escaped his throat. The door slammed shut behind him, trapping him inside. The air grew thick, suffocating, as the figure in the reflection began to crawl towards him, its movements jerky and unnatural. The walls closed in, and the shadows seemed to come alive, reaching for him with twisted fingers. The next morning, the forest was eerily quiet once again. The cottage stood, as it always had, abandoned, forgotten, and in the same rocking chair by the window, there sat a figure, still and lifeless, staring out into the woods with black eyes that never blinked. No one ever found the wanderer, but the locals knew better than to search for him. They knew the witch's house never let its guests leave. It waited patiently, always hungry, always seeking the next soul to claim. And as the years passed, the cottage remained, hidden in the depths of the forest, its dark secrets growing stronger with each passing night.